Welcome in. Monday Live. My name's Jason Priester, Clemson Insider. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in tonight. We are not going to run over past an hour tonight. The national title game kicks off at 7:50. We're not going too long tonight. So 60 minutes. If you got something you want to discuss, get it in. There are a lot of different directions we can go tonight. But the biggest topic, I'm sure, is going to be the transfer portal. How, as quickly as it giveth, it taketh away. Odd weekend there in Clemson, man. Very odd weekend on the portal front. Before we get started with all that, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Trey Humphreys with Old River Real Estate. He's looking forward to expanding his clientele by providing the best customer service in the industry, letting everyone know about it. Residential, commercial, investing, buying or selling. Trey would love the opportunity to help you. Just give him a call, 843-617-6548. That number continuously scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Give Trey a call for all your real estate needs. Yeah, odd weekend there from the portal perspective, man. Clemson doesn't need, it's the portal thing is a little bit different. You see announcements all the time where this guy's committed or this guy's signed, and those are two different things. Clemson usually won't officially announce a guy until he's signed like his scholarship papers. Clemson officially announced Luke Farrelly. Not only that, he's enrolled, he's in class, he's taken part in some of the team activities. He did that on Friday. I remember when this thing first broke, I think it was Thursday night, maybe early Friday, I can't remember. I remember reaching out to somebody and them telling, don't worry, that smoke's been put out, man. Or that fire's been put out. I'm driving to Clemson Friday night, man, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up, man. What's going on with Farrelly? What's going on with Farrelly? I'm sitting there thinking, dang, man, that's kind of old news. So I shot a text out to somebody else that I know, and all of a sudden, man, there's a lot of fire with that smoke, and it just goes to show you, man. Nothing's off limits these days, man. You can have a guy signed and it doesn't matter, man. And in this case, it was the head coach contacting the kid directly, after Farrelly originally tells him no and tells the school that, hey, man, I'm being tampered with. This is what they're telling me. They come back with a bigger offer. One, let's be honest, man, one so big you can't say no to. And make no mistake, man, from my understanding, his offer from Clemson was significant. But there's, the Ole Miss offer is like in the neighborhood of $2 million. You just can't. We're talking about a guy that's played 1 year of football. I don't think anybody on Clemson's roster makes $2 million. It's not a precedent you want to set. You just got to let him walk, man. And there's not going to be a whole lot you can do. That's from my understanding. I don't think it takes time to get all these rev share agreements in place and signed. And I don't think he had signed his yet. He had signed a scholarship agreement, but not the rev share deal. And so I don't know if there's any actual penalties from that perspective that you can recoup. But man, if you've got proof of the tampering, let's just say, man, I'm anxiously awaiting Dabo's next press conference, because if there's a head coach out there that's going to call this stuff out and start naming names, I think he's the one. We were talking to somebody after the basketball game Saturday that works at the school, and it kind of sounds like that's kind of the plan. They're expecting Dabo to be Dabo. I mean, he's kind of railed against this tampering stuff. I mean, he's gone on rants about it several times in the past year or past few years, and he gets mocked about it. The national media people mock him. Um, but I don't know, man. It's one thing to flip a guy who's just committed. It's a whole different ball game when you start talking about reaching out to guys that are already enrolled in class, taking part in team activities, and that's a whole different level, man. But ironically, Ole Miss has got a guy on their roster who signed recently, suddenly changes his mind and wants to go into the portal, and they're I don't know that they've ever entered his name yet. They were kind of fighting against it. I haven't really looked into it today, but last I heard, they were refusing to put his paperwork in. The portal officially closed at midnight Friday, but as long as the player informed the school that they intended to enter the portal, the school still has like 48 business hours to put the paperwork in. I would imagine Clemson will probably drag their feet on putting that paperwork in, but I would fully expect them to do it. Picked up another, you had some bad news over the weekend, get some good news today with the big JUCO defensive tackle. I'm not even going to attempt to say his last name because I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but Andy Burija. That's how you spell it, I think. Big get, I think. You needed to kind of restock there on the interior of that defensive line. I think you've done that with the transfer from Oklahoma. Even the D2 transfer can give you some quality depth there. This kid, and you add him with what you already got, Amari Adams, and some guys like Vic Burley, and I almost said Stephon Green. It's just kind of ingrained in my head, but Vic Burley and some of those other guys that are already on the roster, and you kind of shore up the interior. You've kind of restocked the defensive end a little bit. I love the London Merritt pickup, and you've kind of retooled the secondary. We'll see if they add another linebacker. I don't know what. I kind of tried to go over what was kind of left available in the portal, man, and I just don't see it. There's not a lot of high quality options there, particularly if you're kind of comparing what's left that's available to Farrelly, because that's a guy that was probably going to come in and start alongside Sammy Brown. So you're probably going to end up riding in the next season with what you already have at linebacker, and that would be Sammy and Kobe McLeod and Jeremiah Alexander. We'll see what you can get from the younger Woodaz, Drew Woodaz, and the freshman is coming in, Braden Riley, and we'll see what Logan Anderson's got after tearing the ACL. As a matter of fact, I think he's torn both ACLs at this point, so we'll see what he's got. But I think you're going to ride with what you got at this point. Sorry, I'm reading the comment there. Think you're going to ride with what you got there at offensive line. At linebacker. Clemson might just very well be done at this point. We'll see. Will Dabo have a presser soon? As of right now, there's none scheduled. So I keep thinking, there would be one, like an introductory type press conference for Chad Morris at some point. We're kind of in the middle of the contact period where coaches are on the road, but Morris is not going on the road. So, that's not something you would have to worry about. I would fully expect one at some point in the next week or two. We'll just have to see when it happens. But yeah, I would expect one over the next couple of weeks at some point. Is the staff still looking for a linebacker? I just covered the linebacker part. I see somebody asking about Justin Flo. That's the second time I've been asked about him. That guy is he's not even in the same stratosphere as Forelli. He's kind of been a bust. Sometimes, missing on a guy is a blessing in disguise. He's kind of moved around. And speaking of Forelli, maybe there should have been some red flags with him, from the beginning, because he committed to three different colleges, while in high school. He committed, I can't remember in the order, but I know one of them was Stanford. There was another one. He committed to two different schools and decommitted twice before he ended up at Cal. One of them was Stanford. You got to wonder, though, how much of it's him and how much of it's the agent and some of the people, around him. But, it kind of is what it is. As far as the O-line, though, I would expect them to roll with what they've got. They made the effort. They didn't cast this large, wide net, but they targeted a handful of guys. And, I don't know this to be fact, but just kind of reading between the lines on some things I've heard, it just kind of sounds like they've got Braden Jacobs penciled in at left tackle for next year. And some of these guys they brought in wanted to play left tackle and didn't really want to play right tackle. I'm not saying that's 100% fact. It just kind of sounds that way based on some things I've heard. And then on top of that, I also have been told that some of the guys they brought in, that the price tag was just astronomical for some of those guys. This is what I was laughing at a minute ago. Just wanted to let you know another site has offered me more to watch their show. Well, man, you can watch mine for free. Oh, that's all you can do at this point is laugh about it. Yeah, I'm not. What's the story with the defensive tackle? I'm not sure who you're talking about. If you're talking about Champ Thompson, kind of flirting with going into the portal, I don't know. You got to be more specific there and give me a player. Hopefully Indiana wins. Yeah, I've seen a lot of Clemson fans talking about how they're pulling from Miami because it's an ACC school. I don't know that if you're a Clemson fan, I don't know that Miami winning is necessarily what's good for Clemson. They've already got to keep the $32 million. I think it's $32 million that they're up to. If you count all monies combined, travel expenses and stuff, they've already collected. From making this run, they get to keep it all. They don't have to share it with anyone. They are already well-funded, more than well-funded. They are turning into a recruiting machine. Just look at what they're throwing around to get Darian Mensah from Duke, another guy who was signed. Turns out there was not even like a buyout clause in his deal. But Duke kind of, from what I read, Duke kind of owns his NIL rights. So Miami's going to have to, obviously negotiate that. But if you believe some of the reports that are out there, it's going to cost them upwards of $10 million total. There's some talk that they included a scholarship and NIL money for his sister, who was playing soccer at Oregon, to transfer to Miami. If those numbers are correct, and I tend to believe they're probably a little inflated, most of them generally are. But if those numbers are close to being correct, man, that's insane, man. Clemson would never be able to go out and spend $10 million on one player. They wouldn't have a whole lot left to put the rest of the roster together. Can agents be sued? I I don't know. It just depends. I mean, probably not. Um, there's really I don't know of any rules that prevent agents from shopping a kid. Usually, a lot of that's the way a lot of schools kind of make contact with players. A lot of times is through their representation. That's kind of the gray area. Don't know that it's technically illegal. Where it really gets technically illegal is when the coaches start reaching out to the kids directly. That's when it really starts getting illegal. Or let's not I shouldn't say illegal, against the rules. At this point, if the kid had indeed signed his rev share deal, the best you could hope for in that regard, it would depend on the way the deal is written, but probably the best you could hope for is some kind of penalty clause money you could get from Ole Miss, and it wouldn't be that much anyways. We were talking about this the other day. Some of these templates, have, golly, I'm forgetting the term now. Can't remember what the term's called, but a clause to where maybe you could, conjunctive relief, a conjunctive relief clause where maybe if you played your cards right, you could keep the kid from playing next season. But obviously, you'd have to take that to court, but that would be the extreme. Right now there's just not anybody enforcing the rules, and a lot of people's. I've seen so many people say over the past couple of days, Dabo don't need to say nothing. It won't change anything. No, it's probably not going to change anything. But if you start calling out coaches who tamper by name, they might have second thoughts before they tamper with your players the next time. And somebody needs to take that first step anyways. NCAA needs to just admit there's really no rules. If they can't enforce any, teams need to start taking legal actions against the players and the other schools. Yeah, there's the NCAA has just been sued to the point where they don't really have any teeth left when it comes to enforcement. That's how we got here. But we've already seen, look at Damon Williams, the Washington quarterback. That he signs, and the publicly the number was $4 million, I think, for this season. 4 days later, he suddenly announces on social media he's entering the transfer portal, puts it on Twitter before he even tells the team or the school. And they held, there must have been some kind of penalty clause in there because they held his feet to the fire. He even hired an attorney, the same attorney that Tristan Smith's hired to help get him a year of eligibility back. That's who Damon Williams hired. And it wasn't even 24 hours later, he was announcing a return to Washington. So there was something in that deal that kept him from leaving. A lot of the times it's just going to be, how you write them up and what the players agreed to when he signs. Don't fight it or it may hurt you worse. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't know how it could hurt you worse. Unless Dabo's been out tampering, and I have a hard time believing that. The Ole Miss offer was I've actually seen where it was 2.25. But again, I don't trust any of these numbers that are being floated around, or I trust very few of them anyways. Where's Ole Miss getting all this money from? Ole Miss has been one of the more active teams. I mean, this is not new to them. They've been doing it for a while since Lane Kiffin's there. Man, they've been heavy players in the portal. They've had money to throw around. Sounds like he just wants to go. Who knows what was the final motivator? Well, if he wanted to go that bad, he could have told him yes the first time instead of telling him no. I have a hard time believing this was not purely financial. I'd love to know how much of it was, maybe his parents or his agent or somebody in his ear or somebody that's getting a cut of the money, and how much of it was just him. But based on everything I know right now, this one sounds like it was pretty much all about the money. When's he going to officially sign with Ole Miss? He's got to be put back in the portal first. He can't sign with them, technically. And Clemson's got until Wednesday sometime to do that, because you get 48 business hours, after the kid informs the school that he wants to transfer. So the weekend doesn't count. The day was a holiday, that didn't count. And I wouldn't expect them to be in any hurry to help Ole Miss here. Sounds like they may be also going over their limit, and they just don't care. Well, you got to keep in mind now, there's ways to get around that cap. NIL money doesn't count against the cap, the rev share cap. It's two different types of things, and there's a whole bunch of ways you can doctor that. Hard to fathom that Ole Miss initially offered less than Clemson, then got to the $2 million over 2 years. I don't know what their initial offer was. I don't know. I don't know if it was probably somewhere in the vicinity of what he was getting at Clemson, and he tells them no, and they come back with a bigger one. What happens to players that are left in the portal? They're done, man. They're done. There's going to be, I've kind of only been looking at the FBS numbers. I don't know about the total overall numbers, but the last I looked, hold on a minute. I got to scroll down to find it here. Okay. There were about 1,100 players that had entered the portal total. 3,972 of those were from FBS schools. 40% of the FBS players that were in the portal at this time were still looking for new homes. If they don't find one, they're done. They're going to have to go back to school and pay for it out of their own pocket. They give up the scholarship they had at their, present school, give up their spot on the roster. Because if you go to a coach and say, hey, I want to enter the transfer portal, I don't know of many coaches that are going to hold that spot for you. They're just not going to say, okay, you go shop yourself around and we'll reserve a spot for you in case you want to come back. Now, we have seen instances of guys going in and coming back. Don't get me wrong. I'm just, generally speaking, most coaches aren't going to hold a spot for you. They're going to move on. Now, you might decide you want to come back and it gets worked out. But more often than not, you're not going to have a spot, and you're screwed, man. Everybody says it all the time, but the grass is definitely not always greener. For a lot of these guys, they're finding that out. Let's use Keith Adams as an example. He enters the portal, kind of takes some shots at the Clemson coaching staff on the way out, whether he meant to or not. He come back and tried to clarify what he said, but on the surface, it looks like he's taking some shots, and he didn't believe he got a fair shake. Man, he stayed on the market for a while. He just now landed at Georgia State, so reading those tea leaves, there just weren't a lot of opportunities there for him. I hope he goes and kills it at Georgia State. I hope he makes more money there than he was I hope he makes more money there than he was making at Clemson. I hope he ends up being a big part of the offense. I think that's a good fit for him there, but I don't know that he will make more money there because the grass just isn't always greener. Talk accountability and the lack of actual penalty these days when teams, coaches do tamper or go over the rev share Olympus. That's if you get caught tampering, one of the penalties is supposed to be you taking a hit to your rev share number. But again, you can just go over here and make up for it with the NIL dollars, whether you manufacture them through a third party deal or some other way. That there's ways around that number. But yeah, I'm all for there being some accountability here, man. And it's going to have to start with some coach somewhere is going to have to come out with proof of a fellow coach tampering with his roster. Provide the proof and name the names. That's going to have to be the first step. Now, would Dabo go that far? I tend to think if somebody's going to do it, it might be him. We'll see if he actually does it or not. It might just depend on how pissed off he still is by the time, how long, whether or not he's still, irked by the time he steps up to the podium in front of a mic. But we know Clemson's got the lawyers involved. But again, from my understanding, his rev share deal wasn't signed, so there's not going to be, a whole lot you can do as far as penalizing the kid. It's the tampering, I think, that they're kind of focused on. Particularly when it's a head coach that did the actual tampering. This wasn't some kind of, reaching out through third parties and gauging the kid's interest. Man, this was the head coach directly contacting the player multiple times. Not much action in the portal on offense. Well, if you're not going to take a quarterback, you don't really have that many needs. I mean, you don't have one at receiver. We caught wind last week of a portal receiver says he's going to visit Clemson, and then 5 minutes after he told me he was visiting, he said, "No, the visit's off. I'm not going." Still not sure what happened there, but I was shocked to hear that a receiver was visiting. If you're not going to take a quarterback, to me, I think that's a mistake, not taking a quarterback. But if you're not going to take one, then you've decided you don't have many holes. I thought Clemson could benefit from pairing a veteran back or somebody with experience, alongside Gideon Davidson and Easy if he chose to stay, which he has done. He has chosen to stay. I think they could benefit greatly from that. But outside of that, I didn't think you needed anybody at receiver. They tried to go after some offensive linemen. So, I mean, it's not like they didn't make the effort there. But, no, you had far more holes on the defense, man. That's where the bulk of your investment needed to go once you decide you're not going to take a quarterback. Transfer portal window closed Friday night at midnight. But, again, like the Forelli kid, if he tells the staff he's planning to re-enter the portal on a Friday night, they have 48 business hours from then to put his name in. With it being the weekend and today being a holiday, that 48-hour clock doesn't really start ticking till tomorrow, depending on what time he told them Friday. I mean, it might have started ticking Friday. It just depends on what time he told them. But they would have until Wednesday sometime to put his name in, I imagine. Nothing more significant changes if $25 million was spent. Does this look like a much better roster than this past year that supposedly cost about $21 million? I thought from my understanding, there was a little bit more spent than $21 million last year. But again, I don't trust all these numbers. Let's be clear about that. I do know that they've been telling people at the IPTAY meetings that they're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood, or they were going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 to 27 million to spend this year. Going into last year, I thought Clemson had a pretty dang good roster for 21, 25, whatever it was, 21, 25 million. I thought that was a playoff team. Didn't know, I wasn't convinced of what they'd do once they got there, but I thought they'd make the playoff. I thought that was a playoff caliber team. I can't answer that about this coming season, man, because we just don't know what they've got at quarterback. If it turns out Vizina is what Dabo thinks he's going to be, or Denson beats him out and he has a pretty solid season, I don't know. I think they've made some solid investments on the defensive side of the ball. I think bringing in Johnson was a really solid investment. I would have preferred to see 2 offensive linemen brought in, a tackle and a center. But obviously their focus was on a tackle. Couldn't make it happen for whatever reason. That's irrelevant to this discussion, I think. It's hard to answer that. I do think they made a lot of upgrades on defense. But I have major questions about the quarterback position, and I'm going to have a major question about the quarterback position until we get into the season and see exactly what he is, whoever it may be. You're on here most weeks, GT. I said for a long time that I was convinced Clemson was bringing in a portal quarterback, and they did not do it. So I am definitely of the opinion that was the route they needed to take. But they chose not to. So, I mean, I have serious questions about what they're going to have next year. And that decision alone might end up answering that question. That one decision, deciding not to take a quarterback, might make every other thing you did irrelevant because you didn't get what you needed from the most important position on the field. If that makes sense. Is the Florida transfer defensive lineman still visiting? I can never get it confirmed that he was. That's why I haven't written about it. That's why I haven't really talked about it. So I don't know. That was supposedly going to happen today. But we're talking about a guy that's out of eligibility. He's applied, he played at JUCO his first couple seasons, if I'm remembering right, and he's applied for a waiver that he hasn't gotten yet. So it's kind of undecided whether he's even going to play next year, if I'm not mistaken. So but to answer your question, I can't tell you one way or the other if he ever made it to campus. I couldn't even get it confirmed that he was coming to campus. But with Clemson landing, this other kid today that gives them 3 defensive tackles, if he does get another year of eligibility and you can add him, even better. But I do think finally sealing the deal with this kid today puts them in a much better spot than they were 2 days ago. Are you worried about recruiting on offense with Morris, portal, and high school? That was a concern of mine originally, but they've kind of been alleviated, man. I've talked to more than several high school kids since he's been hired. They like it. They've kind of spoon-fed them some of the stuff they did when Morris was in charge back in the day. Talked about some of the numbers the receivers put up in his era and what Taj did in his era. I can tell you the quarterback loves it. I talked to DJ Huggins. He's another one. Loves it. He's not committed, but he's a wide receiver target. I've talked to several more who are targets and aren't committed in the past few days that, they all say they like to hire. But am I worried about it? Not really. Because the biggest part of the recruiting process these days is transactional. It just doesn't matter nearly as much who the position coach or the coordinators are these days. I am learning that more and more every day. Who do I have tonight, Miami or Indiana? I don't have any ACC pride, man. I'm riding with Indiana. I do think if Miami can find a way to control the line of scrimmage with their defensive front, that's their path to victory. If they do that, they can win. But man, just watching that Indiana team play over the past several weeks, they execute at such a high level. That quarterback's he's just had just complete command of the offense, man. They are just clicking. It's like they're kind of like a buzzsaw right now, man. If Miami can, create some havoc up front and make Mendoza uncomfortable, to me, they can win. But if they don't do that, it might be a long night at the office. And Carson Beck has to not turn the ball over like that's when Miami's gotten in trouble too, is when Beck's been a little sloppy with the ball and throwing picks and stuff. But I think it's going to be a game, man. I think it's going to be a dogfight. But golly, man, Indiana's just executing at such a high level. It's hard to pick against him. I like to see Alexander start. He has too much talent that's going to waste. See, I kind of see Alexander as kind of a tweener. He's not the speediest of guys, and he's a little undersized to be a defensive end. He's a little stiff sometimes. There's a reason Clemson went out and tried to find a starting caliber linebacker for next season. Let's just put it that way. And Kobe McLeod's played well in the little bit of action he's seen, but will he be able to do that over 50, 60, 70 snaps if it ends up, that he wins the job and he's the guy? Farrelly was a huge upgrade, man. He was a huge upgrade over what they already had. But, again, it just is what it is. You got to roll what you got now. Any additional coaches going to be added to the team? You might see one or two here or there added to the support staff, but like I said a few weeks ago, I don't think all those support staff roles that are empty end up being filled. Some of them will be, but I don't think they all will be. I talked to a rising senior in North Carolina. He's listed as an athlete or a wide receiver, depending on which service you look at. Clemson's looking at him as a hybrid safety type linebacker deal, and it was Nolan Turner that got in touch with him. So that tells me Nolan's going to be the safeties coach. I would expect Carrico to kind of be over the nickels, maybe, and Mike Reed still be over the corners, or maybe DeAndre McDaniel stays over the nickels. We'll see. I just know Dabo said in that press release when they let go of Garrett Riley, Khan and Garrett Riley, that he used the word restructuring, when it comes to the defensive staff. So we'll see where everybody ends up. But the only way I see any major shakeups is if a guy, one of the on-field assistants or let's say position coaches would decide to take a gig in the NFL or something. Does Dabo have to release him from his NIL contract since he was already in class? From my understanding, he never signed his rev share deal. Only his scholarship papers. Who do you feel like has the legitimate chance of being starting QB1? I would certainly give the edge to Vizina just because he's been there longer. But, fortunately for Ditson, you're getting a new scheme installed, so you're basically both going to be starting with a clean slate. And I know a lot of people don't want to believe this, but I fully expect a wide open quarterback battle, man. I don't expect the job to be handed to Vizina. Heck, even Dabo said that. I think one last time he was asked about a portal quarterback, he was like, while on one hand he talked about Vizina waiting his turn, but on the other hand, he also added in there he's got to go win the job. I don't think it's going to be handed to him, but I would certainly give him the edge at this point. But I wouldn't be outright shocked if Denson ended up beating him out. Did Clemson do the same thing Ole Miss did? Absolutely not. Not even in the same hemisphere. What Clemson did today equates to flipping a high. What happens when they go out and flip a high school kid. This kid's, while his reps did tell me that he had to enter the portal. This is a JUCO guy. He can't sign until February. It's basically like adding to your 2026 recruiting class. So he had signed no scholarship papers. He wasn't enrolled in school or anything like that. With Forelli, we're talking about a kid that's signed, enrolled in classes, taking part in team workouts. This guy was just committed. That's it. Nothing else. That's a big distinction to make here. Baseball practice just started last week. I've not been to any of the practices, but I was very encouraged by what I saw in the fall, particularly from the pitching. My thoughts on Courtney Kelly. I think he can play, man, but I think he's listed at like 280, 285 pounds. So I think he's a good depth piece. I'm not sure he's the guy you're going to run out there and depend on playing 30, 40 snaps a game. But I think he's a good rotational piece that can come in and give some other guys a breather. And he looks like he can play. He looks big. He looks strong. But when you start talking about power forward defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen, he's a hair light in the britches, if you know what I mean. So we'll see where he ends up falling in the pecking order. But that's why I thought it was imperative that Clemson landed at least one more defensive tackle before it was all said and done with, and they did that today. Is Dabo even in Clemson? I've never seen him this quiet during his time at Clemson. Dabo never does pressers in January, ever. Unless it's to, they have an introductory press conference for a new coordinator. I can't remember when they did Garrett Riley's. I don't remember if they did it during the contact period or not. And I can't remember when they did Tom Allen's. I'll see if I can find it here. Let's see. But I mean, it is not unusual at all for Dabo to not speak to the media in January. He never does. And he's definitely not going to during the 2-week portal window. They did the introductory press conference for Tom Allen last year in January, but you got to remember the portal window was much earlier last year. It didn't come the first 2 weeks of January. We'll end up seeing him some point over the next couple of weeks, but it's not unusual at all for him to not meet with media in January. You won't hear from him in February either until the end of the month when it's time for spring practice to start up. From I can tell you he's been in Clemson this weekend because they had an official visitor on campus. The Blevins kid, the wide receiver that just committed yesterday. For those wondering, that addition has nothing to do with Tristan Smith. When Parker Fulgham left, that opened up a spot. Parker Fulgham, although he was a walk-on originally, he was on scholarship last year. He was on the 105. So when he transferred out, that opened up a spot. And they got in touch with Blevins early last week, got him on campus this weekend, and he shut it down last night. He was supposed to go to Vanderbilt this weekend, but he's shut it down now. So I can tell you he was on campus this weekend outside of going to the I think it was – I can't remember. Some conference last week for 2 days. He's been in Clemson. Miami would have had more money regardless of the playoff or not, just the world we're living. I never said they wouldn't. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Had Miami missed the playoff, from my understanding, their NIL funding was going to be cut. There was already a gap between Clemson and Miami, but with them winning like that, that gap gets much bigger. Anybody that believes otherwise being a little bit naive. This deep run is going to fill up the coffers even more than they've been filled in the past couple of years. The guys that haven't been donating are going to start donating. The guys that have been are donating are going to start donating even more. And that is a huge alumni base with a bunch of NFL alumni that they can hit up. Matter of fact, their biggest donor, man, is not even one of those guys. And it's not the Ruiz guys that used to fund them when all this first started. Now, they've got multiple people they can turn to, and this deep playoff run is absolutely going to have them more well-funded than they already were. Miami is carrying the ACC. You should be happy Miami can compete at this level and keeps the ACC relevant. I don't give a damn what Miami does. I don't care what North Carolina does. I don't care what any of them do, man. As a football fan, I pull for one team. I don't care what conference they play in, what league they play in. I don't care what I would never pull for a conference rival to have more success than I do, because it just makes it harder to compete against that conference rival. To me, that is rooting against your self-interest. If you're a Clemson fan, if you're a Miami fan, hey, more power to you. You should be rooting hard for them. Still got to be someone as productive as at least Wood has in the portal to pay with some of the Farrelly allocation. I don't know that I didn't, when I looked to see what linebackers were left in the portal, I didn't see anybody that I would overinvest in. Nobody that jumped out at me anyways. Did Kiffin put Golding on to Farrelly possible? I don't know if you've been paying attention, man, but Kiffin and Golden and Ole Miss and LSU are not on the best of terms right now. That's another thing that makes this thing so ironic, man. Ole Miss has been crying loudly about how Kiffin and LSU has been poaching their roster and tampering and this, that, and the other. It turns out they're doing the same thing. But no, I don't think Kiffin is helping Ole Miss in any way, shape, or form. Is there any certification for the college agents, like the agents in the NFL? I mean, I don't, not in every state. No, there's some states where Uncle Mike can be your agent. Yeah, Ole Miss has got a much they've got a much bigger alumni base than Clemson does for sure. Clemson is in big trouble if they lose Ferrelli. They've already lost him, man. That's done and over with. He's not playing at Clemson next year. Yeah, hey, that's another thing that's ironic in this whole deal. The TJ Dottery, formerly TJ Dudley, when he entered the portal and left Ole Miss, that is what kicked this whole thing off. And guess where he went? Lane Kiffin and LSU. Knock, Titsworth, and Bell as the opening weekend starters. I don't know, man. I don't know. Based on everything I heard in the fall, the preference would be for Titsworth to stay in the bullpen. So if I think he's probably going to be a bullpen guy. You know, Knock's going to start. Bell's probably going to start. We'll see. Maybe the Tennessee transfer. I know that he started some games in the fall. Sharman. And I think McGovern's probably a candidate. We'll see. But I do believe that the preference would be Titsworth staying in the pen. All right, I'm trying to scroll through these last ones. Do I think Dabo would do like Ole Miss until the Ferrelli kid that tell the Ferrelli kid that, I expect them to put him back in. I just don't expect them to be in a rush to do it. The portal doesn't close for committing. As you saw today, as you've seen all weekend, guys are still committing. Clemson landed the JUCO guy today, even though he's a JUCO guy. You know, or at least from what his rep told me, he did have to enter the portal. So I mean, in a way, he's a portal guy. The big thing there is, you know, it's going to have to be wrapped up before long, because if you want the guy to participate in spring practice, he's got to be enrolled by a certain time. It just depends. And what that day is depends on when school starts at that particular school. And, you know, usually if they get it done pretty quickly after classes have started, they can get him enrolled, but you can't wait too long. No, there was no correlation between Ferrelli and the defensive tackle. They never stopped trying to get the defensive tackle even after he committed to Nebraska. The basketball team, yeah, they're starting to make believers out of me. If you've watched this, you know I've kind of been a little skeptical. But they handled Miami the other day, man. They made them uncomfortable for 40 minutes. That was an impressive defensive showing, man. They held Miami to well under their average points per game. It was fun to watch. Now you get to see Will Wade again tomorrow night. I'd love to hear a montage of all the Clemson media reporters, etc., that said it is my belief that next year's quarterback is not currently on the roster. I don't know one who didn't. I don't know what the others have said. I know that I said that, but again, I know why I had a reason for saying that too, and why I believe that, which I think I explained here last week and the week before. But it's not the first time I've been wrong, and it will not be the last. With his incentive-based contract, Dabo could have really screwed Morris with not taking a QB. If Morris doesn't think he can be successful with the quarterback plan in place, why take the job? DJ Lagway's going to Baylor. Is Chandler Morris still an option? I mean, theoretically, yes, but there's, his waiver's been denied. He's going to have to go the legal route to try to get another year, and that would be a seventh year. Virginia's already moved on and got their quarterback in place for next year. That thing could take. Same with Tristan Smith, man. It could be months before you even get an answer to that. I lean towards thinking that Clemson's going to want their quarterbacks working in the spring. So some of that might depend on how long it takes to get an answer. Do I think they will televise the spring game this year with the portal being closed? I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't. That's no way for me to answer that. From far as I know, Chris Johnson's already on campus. I know he was last weekend. I mean, school classes has already started. I'm assuming he's in class. Troy Stellato has signed with UNLV. Example of a guy who should have stayed put at Clemson, would have had significant minutes last year and probably this year, but he's bounced around. And for what? I get why he left. He got passed by on the depth chart by a younger guy and flat out told me himself that he was pissed off about it. I don't know that his snap count would have been any different. I think it would have been lower this year. Especially if everybody stayed healthy. I don't know. I didn't hear that he was hurt at Kentucky. He couldn't get on the field there. I think he's probably about where he should be right now. Unfortunately for him, man, I just think injuries played a toll on his body, and he's not nearly the guy he was when he signed coming out of high school. Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with Stellato being better than Brown. At this point, I'd be more confident in the team if one of the freshman QBs won the job. Why? What's the difference? We've seen very little of Vizina. We've seen really nothing from Denson against quality opponents outside of some Furman backups for a few minutes. The Tate Reynolds kid hadn't played in a year. Nobody ever talks about Brock Bradley, man, but that guy can sling it, man. If he was an inch or two taller, he's probably got Power 4 offers rolling in. But he's just a tad undersized. But that guy can play. But, I haven't really seen anything from all four. What gives you more confidence in one of those two than, over the other two that we haven't really seen much of? What have I heard about Denson? We got to get this thing wrapped up. I was told he's been electric at times and needs work. Yeah, that's what I've been told. He needs a lot of work in the passing game. Sure, we all know he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's got to grow as a passer. I think his arm strength's probably below average. Watching him at practice, the ball, and they come out of his hands very wobbly a lot. He's got a very wonky throwing motion due to being left-handed. Yeah, I'm throwing some more left-handed slander out there. I think those are some things that can be cleaned up, but I don't know how long it'll take. I think he's probably nowhere near where he needs to be the starting quarterback at this level. Now the question is, can he get there in a spring and a fall? Da-da-da. Miami fans on a Clemson stream on 9. We had some Miami fans in here last week too, if I'm remembering right. How can teams ever be able to compete in the future against these 40, 50? I don't know of any 40, $50 million rosters yet. Probably coming. But I understand your point. Yeah, there's only so many schools that can invest that kind of money in a roster, and Clemson's not one of them. Georgia's probably not one of them. Bama's probably not one of them. That's probably why the SEC and the Big Ten aren't so chummy anymore like they were a year or so ago. What positions on the offensive line would you expect to be worse than what we got from the team last year? The hope would be none of them, but I'm gonna say center. I don't have a lot of confidence in Harris Sewell, man, and I think he's probably next in line there. The thought that Vazina is not athletic is incorrect. He is more of a dual threat than CK2, and he has pretty good top end speed. I have always been told he's a little bit quicker and more athletic than he looks. The problem is he's not played that way when he's been in there. I don't know if he's just not built up the confidence as a runner or what. But he certainly has not appeared to be a more of a dual threat quarterback than Klubnik was, and Klubnik wasn't much of one, particularly, and he was more so in 24. But after they didn't use him a lot to run at the beginning of the season, then he got hurt when they started using him a little bit. But maybe if he can get some confidence in his ability as a runner, that'll change. But he's really not showed it yet. That's why people don't believe it. Linthicum was a good snapper, but as a blocker, he left a lot to be desired. And I thought Linthicum was worse, took a step back in 25. But what have you seen from Sewell that leads you to believe he's going to be better than Linthicum was at center? Because I don't know that I've seen anything that gives me that kind of confidence in him. We'll see. Hopefully a couple of those younger guys would be ready to step up. Maybe Gavin Blanchard even beats him out. I wouldn't bet money on it. Dabo's never started an underclassman at center, but maybe a couple of those younger guys would be ready to step up and start at some other positions, particularly right tackle. Because we haven't seen, to me, the candidates would be Sadler or Thurman, right? We just haven't seen much of Thurman. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be pretty good. Sadler, I kind of put Sadler in the same boat as Sewell. I just haven't seen a whole heck of a lot that gives me a lot of confidence in him. And I know he's played hurt a lot and he hadn't been fully healthy, but part of being good, staying healthy, and sometimes that takes some luck. All right, we're going to let everybody go and watch the national title game, including myself. Want to thank our sponsor, Trey Humphreys, over at Old River Real Estate. He's looking to expand his clientele by providing the best customer service in the industry and letting everyone know about it. Residential, commercial, investing, buying or selling. Trey would love the opportunity to help you. 843-617-6548. That's how you get a hold of my man, Trey. Shout out Adams Pest and Termite Control. They do pest, termite, moisture control right here in the PD. Give Mike and his crew a call, 843-858-3166. Don't forget, no show next week. We'll be right back here in 2 weeks. I'm thinking the chances of hearing from Dabo between now and then are pretty good. 2 weeks from tonight, right back here, 7 p.m. Check us out on the site, ClemsonInsider.com.